Welcome to this edition of the Uncharted Sounds Podcast. I'm Noel. I'm here with my good mate Martin. How are you doing, Martin?
Yeah, all good on this one, Noel.
Perfect. Now, before we talk about the artist on this episode, what have you been listening to this week?
Yeah, so I've been listening to an album that goes back to 2007 by a band, I know that you know them too, but by a band called Milburn.
Oh, brilliant.
And the album was called These Are the Facts. It was their second album. But it's got loads of great songs, Count to 10, What Will You Do When the Money Goes, and so on. And I know we went to see them, didn't we, in Northampton? So
we did, yes, we did. We saw them in the Sound House, didn't we? But they were supported by the Envy Corps, weren't they?
they were another great band.
Yeah. No, the Envy Corps, awesome band, yeah.
So what about you?
So I've been listening to a track I hadn't heard for a while. I forgot how great it is. It's a band called Young Marble Giants, and they're from Cardiff. A girl-fronted band, a bit like another Welsh band, obviously the Darling Buds we spoke to on a podcast, and it's called Final Day, and it's kind of it's a very short song, but it's something quite beautiful about it, almost ethereal about it. It's a great song. That's fantastic, isn't it? So let's start. So who are we talking to today? Who are we talking about today, Martin?
Well, actually, we're talking to and about the band Brinsley Schwarz.
Well, they danced to every tune the band could play. At just about midnight, well, they decided to call it a day. Now there's one thing that's left here on their mind. Yeah. To get a little slice at any price, yeah. To store the shoes of rice and surrender to the rhythm that is calling them home.
Brinsley Schwarz, and I guess this is a bit of a companion episode, if you think of it like that, to our Graham Parker episode.
Yes, yeah.
Because obviously Brinsley Schwarz himself, the guitarist, who we'll be chatting to later on in this episode, but Brinsley Schwarz was obviously in the band Brinsley Schwarz, also in a band beforehand, which we'll come on to, but also part of the Rumour, which was part of Graham Parker and the Rumour.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know a lot about. I look much more at pure street, this kind of music. Fascinating. As we talked about on previous episodes that touch on this genre, this stuff paved the way for punk rock, really. You know, the connections to Stiff Records and The Damned and all these other artists like Elvis Costello. So yeah, really fascinating.
Let's get going then. So
Yes.
So Brinsley Schwarz, right? His career has spanned sort of 6 decades. The Brinsley Schwarz band, which we'll come on to the how that came about in a bit. But that was the infrastructure for punk, as you say. There was a proper shift, if you like, from prog rock to pub rock to punk, and then you've got to start. You go through in the 60s. He sort of, from what I can ascertain, he sort of fell in love with the guitar after hearing the Shadows and playing, because obviously the Shadows were massive in the 60s.
Oh, they were huge. Yeah.
You just can't quite comprehend how big they were. And then he sort of formed his sort of first band, Three's a Crowd, and that band evolved into an outfit called Kippington Lodge. Let's get to a stage where we talk about how Brinsley Schwarz came about. So we're talking 1969. As I say, the band were Kippington Lodge initially. They signed to Parlophone Records, released several singles, but never quite got chart success. And they sort of had what you might call a roots-influenced sound, managed by Dave Robinson, who obviously went on to found Stiff Records.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I also looked up a couple of bits of information about Kippington Lodge. Do you remember when we did that episode with It's Immaterial and we chatted to JJ Campbell? His previous band, Yachts. Yes, that's right. His previous band, Yachts, got a residency at Eric's in Liverpool, and obviously ended up supporting loads of bands of the era, including the Sex Pistols. Now, I noticed that Kippington Lodge actually got themselves a regular support slot at the Marquee in London, and they were like the regular support band for a period of time. The other thing I found out about them was that one of their previous managers, called John Schofield, was actually at the time a lover, or a boyfriend, I should say, of Hattie Jakes, a British actress who's in loads of comedy films. So apparently he used to make the band sandwiches.
Okay. So yes, 1969, Kempington Lodge then renamed themselves Brinsley Schwarz. They named themselves after the guitarist. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what Brinsley says, but I think there was a view that it sort of sounded a bit distinctive and maybe a bit mysterious. But in reality, I think the rest of the band decided that they were going to call it Brinsley Schwarz. I'm not sure he was that keen on the idea because he was obviously, what happens if he left? But I think the rest of the band were keen because they thought it was a cool name. So Brinsley Schwarz were Brinsley Schwarz on guitar. And as I said earlier, we'll be talking to Brinsley later. Nick Lowe on bass and vocals, Bob Andrews on keyboards, Billy Ranking, senior on drums, and Ian Gomm on guitar, who joined in 71. In that band, Brinsley Schwarz, it was Nick Lowe, interestingly enough, that emerged as like the principal songwriter. So in 1970, they released their debut album, Brinsley Schwarz. They were on United Artists. They also released another album called Despite It All. And that's where perhaps some of the Nick Lowe songwriting started to come through.
Right, yeah.
A particular song, Country Girl. Now, in 1970, they did this thing, which was a bit of a publicity stunt, which was quite famous at the time. But I'm going to précis the story because it's quite lengthy. And maybe Brinsley will mention it when we talk to him. But it was one of those big PR sort of misfires, I suppose. Some journalists were flown to New York for a showcase at the Fillmore East. Obviously, Brinsley Schwarz were quite unknown. The audience were a bit indifferent. The press turned hostile. They had problems getting with visas, getting from the UK to America, and they had to go via Canada. And then they literally turned up very, very soon before the concert was due to begin. And at the same time, they'd sort of flown over a plane load of journalists who had all partook in the drink and was on the plane. So they all arrived, half cut. So it was one of those things. And although it damaged their sort of credibility a bit, it did push the band towards the grassroots pub circuit.
Interesting, yeah. I'd read the same information actually, and also that they were opening. Actually, they weren't the main act. It was Van Morrison who was the lead act to that gig. Also, when they got there, having got there late, they were using someone else's kit, someone else's equipment, so they weren't familiar with that either.
I mean, the story itself is sort of one of those things of folklore. And Will Birch wrote a book about it, No Sleep Till Canvey Island, which is actually a cracking book. And if you've got No Sleep Till Canvey Island and you've got the Jay Nachman Howlin' Wind book of Graham Parker's first album, that tells you a massive story of that time in that sort of early pub rock and early to mid 70s time. Both very, very good books. And as I said, 1971, Ian Gomm joined the band, and that's where they started getting a pretty decent reputation on that London pub circuit.
I also read in 71 that they played the second Glastonbury Festival.
Ah, that's interesting because Glenn Tilbrook of Squeeze actually went to that second Glastonbury Festival. And it was a festival then where you could literally camp in front of the pyramid stage.
Wow.
Obviously different these days, but people would sleep and just put their head out the tents and they could see who was on stage, Yeah,
interesting though. What an experience that would have been.
Yeah. So we get through to that sort of early 70s period. 72, they released an album called Silver Pistol, and they also released an album called Nervous on the Road, which actually included the song Nervous on the Road, which is also a really sharp song.
I tell you a story about a man I know. He's got himself a problem, and it ain't no joke. You see his hands are tied or to this whipping post. He get nervous on the road, he can't stay at home. Whiskey, not him amphetamine. I fought him to cover up on those other scenes. He tries hard every day at the bank of life, but they still won't give him a loan now since he got another.
73, and they released another album, Please Don't Ever Change, but they supported Paul McCartney's Wings. During that time, had quite large UK tours, had quite a bit of exposure. They started to play larger venues, started to appear on the festival bills, shared some stages with people like Eric Clapton, Humble Pie, Man.
Yeah, it's interesting because I read that because Dave Edmunds had produced that album, they ended up being, for a short period of time, his backing band when he went on tour.
So starting to move into sort of those mid-70s, 74, they released an album called The New Favourites of Brinsley Schwarz, and that was their final studio album. That was also produced by Dave Edmunds. But the one thing about that album is that it's got the song that was written by Nick Lowe called What's So Funny About Peace, Love and Understanding.
This wicked world, searching for light in the darkness of insanity. Oh yeah, I ask myself, is our hope gone? Is there only pain, hatred and misery? Oh yeah, and each time I feel like this inside, there's one thing I wanna know. Oh, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Oh, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding?
Yeah, so one of the people who did cover it was Elvis Costello, and I read that Elvis was a big fan of Brinsley Schwarz and he used to go and see them. And in fact, I read somewhere that at one time he was a part-time roadie.
Yeah, because that did appear on his US version of his Armed Forces album.
Right.
So if we sort of dive a bit into that song, it's sort of people see it as like the bridge between that pub rock and maybe power pop new wave type thing. And Nick Lowe has said that the song was written sort of almost sarcastically at first, you know, almost like a hippie idealist sort of wandering through a hostile world and, you know, and so on. But the song has become a bit more sincere than that. And although the original version was recorded by Brinsley Schwarz, it wasn't a major hit. So you mentioned Elvis, but do you know who else covered that song?
I don't.
Lots of different people, but Curtis Stigers covered it for the Bodyguard soundtrack.
Oh, wow.
And I've read that has sort of kept Nick Lowe in a good level of income
royalties
ever since that. Yeah, in royalties, yeah. But Bruce Springsteen has done it live. Billy Joe Armstrong has done it live. And I think, once again, Nick Lowe's always sort of said that it's the one song he'll maybe be remembered for, and he's pretty happy with that. And another little fun podcast fact was that Roger Bachirian, who we covered in an earlier episode, was the engineer on that song too.
Fantastic. Roger's got a fascinating story. So yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, if you're interested, go back and listen to that episode because it's a genuinely fascinating episode. Okay, they became fixtures on that pub rock circuit, and a lot of the punk people from the Clash and the Pistols. There's plenty of evidence to say that they attended those shows on a regular basis.
So moving on just from that slightly, in early 75, I saw they did a Peel session. And what was really interesting was that it included a track written by Nick Lowe, which later became a single for him, called Cruel to Be Kind.
Heartache, though you say you're my friend, but I'm at my wit's end. You say your love is bona fide, but that don't coincide with the things that you do. And when I ask you to explain, you say you gotta be cruel to be kind in the right measure. Cruel to be kind, it's a very good sign. Cruel to be kind means that I love you, baby. Be cruel to be kind. Whoa.
Okay, so mid-70s, the Brinsley Schwarz disbands. After six albums. So we then go into post Brinsley Schwarz. Well, now Brinsley himself briefly joined Ducks Deluxe on their final tour, and then co-founded the Rumour with Bob Andrews, supporting Graham Parker. Now, obviously, we did cover quite a bit of this in the Graham Parker episode. So,
yes.
We're not going to go through all that again. There was a real link between Kippington Lodge, Brinsley Schwarz, and the Rumour.
Absolutely.
So 76 to 81, that sort of mid 70s to early 80s. Brinsley toured extensively with Graham Parker and the Rumour. He was on some of those early key albums, Howling Wind, Heat Treatment, Stick to Me, Squeezing Out Sparks, and so on. And, they toured, we know that they toured extensively, as I say, covered a lot of that in the Graham Parker episode.
And that first album, Howling Wind, was actually produced by Nick Lowe as well. So that connection still carried on.
So in the 80s, Brinsley sort of tentatively retired from live performing in the late 80s, 89, and then started to work as a luthier, a guitar builder or repairer. And although he stayed connected to the music world, so he's made 3 solo albums. He sort of went back to performing with the Rumour on their reunion dates. He funnily enough, also went back with Ducks Deluxe for some final shows before they finally finished. In 2016, he released his debut solo LP called Unexpected. 2021, released his second solo album called Tangled. And then literally last year, he released his third one called Shouting at the Moon. And on that one, he did a cover of the Graham Parker song, Watch the Moon Come Down.
All right, cool.
In this dirty town, there's nothing going for me. No show's going down that I would wanna see. Nothing but the midnight train on this shady street in a top floor flat. Women take their sheets down to the laundromat, and as the night falls on this town, I'm gonna watch the moon come down. I'm gonna watch the moon come down. Yeah, gonna watch.
And I think more recently, he's had a little bit of recognition in the music press as being, a key part of that pub rock evolution.
Yeah, I mean, for definite, when I looked at it, as you have, well, you already knew, but he's definitely part of the whole DNA of the pub rock thing, throughout, connecting to all those different bands which came together and led on to sort of the punk and new wave from there. So it's great history there, and it'd be great to talk now to Brinsley to find out more about it. So Brinsley, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, nice to be here.
So I came to see you actually at the Bob Andrews Memorial Concert at the Half Moon in Putney, and I have to say, I don't know how it was for you guys. Obviously a sad occasion, but seeing you play "Surrender to the Rhythm" with Nick also on the stage was I'll be honest with you, was a very special moment. So I don't know how it was for you.
Well, yes, I was then recovering from pneumonia. So I had sort of moments or long moments of being up and for it, and then I would need to go and sit down. So I don't know if you noticed, I played guitar on about half the songs and sang backup vocals with Graham. Actually, I really enjoyed singing backup vocals, but I don't really remember very much about it, except for it was a very, very busy night, but I wasn't really all there.
Okay. Well, to be honest with you, that didn't come across at all. So you did pretty well in covering that.
Well, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to, and more than the occasion maybe needed. But it was just good fun, and I think Bob would have taken that.
I mean, how did it come about? How did you decide to do why did you decide to do a memorial concert like that?
Martin, Graham, and myself have found an Indian restaurant called the Bombay Flame, which is the best Indian restaurant we've ever gone to, and so we've been going quite often. And on occasions where we hang around and talk and try to remember movie stars' names because we're old and we forget everything. We were talking about it, and I said I imagined that we could, the three of us, could just go into the Half Moon with some acoustic guitars, maybe one little electric, and just sing songs and not even worry about learning or anything, just standing up and singing songs as we remembered them. So we were going to talk about that idea. The next time I spoke to Martin, he said, okay, so, well, the Half Moon is booked. It sold out yesterday. We're doing a gig. Nick's coming to play. And I thought, well, so not a quiet little evening in with acoustic guitars in, but a gig. So that's what happened.
Yeah, those are your early influences then in the band Brinsley Schwarz. We'll come on to that. Did they impact the Brinsley Schwarz sound, or was that in the songwriting?
Well, we were called originally the Brinsley Schwarz Band and then Brinsley Schwarz. It's not my idea. I fought it tooth and nail, and I was overdone with it. So that's what happened. And sometimes it's been really good that that's my name, and sometimes it's a pain in the neck. But yeah, I think the songwriting was always Nick. I was quite prolific as a teenager. I wrote loads of Dylan-esque songs that were complaining about just about everything on the planet. And Dylan, that's what Dylan did. So it was much point in me adding to it. But when Nick arrived, then he was a really good songwriter and wrote songs that all knitted together. So it became how we played quite quickly. But I think that the dreaded trip to New York had a much profounder effect on us. At that time, we were into not even funk rock, but pop rock, I think it was called in those days. We used to play at the Marquee a lot, supporting bands like Yes and stuff. And I don't think we were ever that excited about it. We were sort of struggling until we went to the dreaded New York gig, which changed our minds, our everything really, in 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's an incredible story about New York.
Yes.
What do you remember of it?
I remember quite a lot of it, actually. So we were separated, that Nick, Bob and myself and Dave Robinson, our manager, were separated from Billy, the drummer, who had a dual passport. He didn't need visas or anything like that. He just got on the plane and flew. We needed visas, And in those days, there was a musicians' union thing. It was quite easy to get a visa, not so easy to get somebody to from America wanting to come over and like an exchange thing. So as it turned out, we were due to fly out on Tuesday morning and get into the hotel, and then we had 3 days booked, the Fillmore East booked for us to rehearse in and acclimatise, and all of that, along with everything else we were supposed to be doing on that trip with the press and photographs and the whole thing, that all went down the toilet because we didn't get visas. I think it was Arthur Love. You remember him at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
From Love, yeah.
He was our exchange and he got laryngitis. So our visas were cancelled. So Dave said, no worries, we'll go to Canada and we'll just fly into New York from Canada. So not a problem. So we went to Canada, and the customs and excise guy that we got faced with didn't like us at all. We had long hair, and in those days, having long hair was in the States was kind of asking for it. He called us up all together and said, you think that you guys are smart? You think I don't have a lot of heavy-duty computers behind me that tell me that you were turned down for visas just yesterday afternoon? And then he picked up our visas and our papers and said, you want to go to the United States of America? No chance. And shut the whole load at us. And we failed again. And then Dave went off. We got in the hotel where we daren't go out in case we got stopped for a visa check. And we just stayed in the hotel, watched a lot of Star Trek and ate burgers, and waited for Dave to do some magic. He was the manager, and he did. He came on Friday morning. We were told to go back to the visa place, and there's a question that you have to answer on the visa form is, have you ever been refused a visa to the United States of America? So I said to Dave, hey, Dave, what do we put here? And he said, I don't know, try no. Then we put no. And then the guy it was the same guy doing the passports. We'd obviously fiddled our way around the visa problem, which was getting on a senator's good books and a little bit of cash or something. So I think it was about 12:30. We were due on stage that day at 7:00. So we had 6.5 hours to get from Canada, from Toronto to New York. The guy put our visas and the papers in a neat little stack at the front of his desk, and then went to lunch and came back as slowly as he could, and finally had to give us our visas. By that time, there was a general ground crew strike on the east coast of the States, so we had visas but no plane. We rented this little Japanese guy to fly us to New York, which he did. Freaked my ears out completely. I couldn't hear a thing until the next morning. So
I'm assuming that was quite a small plane then. It still was on the jumbo jet.
Yeah, four-seater, yeah.
Oh God.
and so he was like, it was like his day to have fun with his passengers. Let's throw the plane around a little bit and see what they like. One of the really good ones was put the plane on its wingtip.
God, just fly on his side.
So he just looked down the wing, out the window, looked down the wing, and there was the ground. Anyway, we got there. We had no time. The equipment was wrong. We had no time to do anything really. I think we arrived there about 7:15. Changed, had a drink, and walked on stage for the first of our 4 shows. And we were not in a good state really. Although Bob remembered it as good fun. Anyway, we finished. I went to the dressing room to pass out, basically, and Nick came in and down from the stage and said that you've got to come and see this guy. So we all trooped outside of the stage, and there was Van Morrison and his band, and we had never heard anything like it. And that's what changed us. Seeing someone play and sing with a band like that he had just blew us away. Do you know there's an island in Manhattan?
Go on.
Which one is it?
It's on the river, and it was in
French Connection.
The French Connection. Well done. Yes.
Oh, Roosevelt Island.
Yeah, that's right. So
Yeah.
Dave saw this island and told the it was a limousine driver, said, let's go on there, take some pics on there. That looks good. And about 10 minutes after we'd unloaded, we had 3 Cadillac limousines. So we rolled onto this place and got out and started looking around and taking photographs. And the New York police were really pissed and came and to arrest us. You weren't allowed on that island. And we've got a great photograph of Dave, who had long, sort of very curly hair, standing next to this big New York cop who was standing there with his thumb. And there's his pistol and his thumb resting here.
Resting, yeah.
Just making sure that we understood who was who in this little thing. Anyway, I think Dave gave them some tickets or something. I got chatting with the guy and they let us go. So we played 3 more shows. They tended to get a little bit better. The last one was the best. But as we came home and sort of understood what had happened to us, we decided that to be a band, you need to live together. It's a commitment to do everything as one thing. We'd watched Van Morrison and his band prove it to us for 4 nights. So we thought, okay, we've got to be as good as that. And so we managed to rent a big house in Northwood. I think it was the dining room we converted into a practice room, and we just played. Got up at midday into the practice room and play. At one point we were playing James Brown riffs endlessly. We would, one person after about 10 minutes, one person would change the riff very, very slightly, and gradually everyone would switch in behind him. We learned how to play like a band.
Yeah, you're like tuning in together all the time, like syncing your whole mindset and the instruments together and the music together. I get that.
Yeah.
Hanging out at Frankie's, everyone was stoned. Player, it was playing something really gone. Some people, they were dancing, and some were clapping hands, and some others were just lying close, making sweet romance. But the hour was growing later, and I had sure been fun. And when Frankie said, come on, let's break it up, everybody spoke out at once. Play that fast thing one more time. Yeah. Does something to me to make them so fine. Play that fast thing one more time. We're gonna be in Clover on the eve, on if you turn it over. We'll see eye to eye. Play it one more time. Now the band had just finished. Wound up and done.
Did I read that the American band, The Band, came and used to rehearse there as well?
We were the same record labels. So the guy that dealt with the bands, I think Martin is name, he called us up one day, and we didn't know anything about who was playing around. And so I answered the phone. It was Martin, and I said, "Yeah, what's up?" And he said, "Well, the band are here, and they're looking for a place to rehearse, and we figured your house would be the best place." And at this point, we'd changed houses. We were in a big old farmhouse, and I said, "What band?" Yeah, and Martin said, "The Band," and I still didn't get it. He had to
No,
say it a few times.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, right, yes, oh, okay, yeah, of course." I remember Nick making sandwiches for them, and Billy going out to get some beers. Anyway, they rolled up. And they had one piece of equipment, which was the Lowry organ. I don't think they'd seen anything like it that old. But they played for 2 or 3 hours in our rehearsal room. Sounded just like the band, which freaked me out because I'd been spending quite a long time trying to sound like Robbie Robertson and not getting very far at all. And
That's amazing. Yeah.
I think they had a good time, and then they were off.
So just going right back, dialing right back to Kippington Lodge, your early band. I think you had a residency as a support band at the Marquee. And did you get to play? I think you played with Yes as one of the lead bands. What other bands did you play with, or what memories do you have of that?
I only remember Yes and The Nice. Was it? I remember Yes, and all the bands that were playing at the Marquee were either blues bands or advancing musical bands. Halfway through that, the influence that the band had on us took hold, and that's when we stopped being what were they called, like a pop rock band. So you played songs but tried to be a jazz player at the same time,
Right.
which we weren't really very, very good at.
So if you move you then moved into Brinsley, and you said that the Fillmore experience, changed you as a band.
Yeah.
Is there a moment or a song that you think, actually, that was when we felt like we'd achieved something in terms of like either from a songwriting point of view, or from a arrangement, or a band, or
Yeah. So I don't remember there being a moment. I remember something that happened that not only affected us, but not hugely because it was just us playing, but affected the audience in the weirdest and oddest way. That was we were in Germany and we were having a dreadful tour. Cars broke down in the middle of the forest, the Black Forest. It was not going well at all. And in the end, we came to the last gig, which was in Munich at the Zoom Club. Our roadie came in after we'd sound checked and everything. Our roadie came in and said, "Okay, well, it's about time, but everybody is lying around. There's like nothing going on at all. Just a load of people, and they're all stoned and just lying around." So we said, "Okay," and I had written a little Shadows type country instrumental, which we played sometimes just for the fun of it. And so we said, well, let's play that, and then we'll play. And then there was another song. What was that called? It was a Jim Ford song, but we used to jam it. Nicky Hokey, it was called. So we said, well, we'll just play that for 40 minutes, and that'll be this half sorted out. So we got on there, played the little instrumental, and then went into Nicky Hokey. And we could play Nicky Hokey for hours, days. So, we just had a good time with it. We stopped just with a typical ending. It was like, thanks very much, people. We'll see you next time. We'll be back in 20 minutes or whatever it was. And the place went mad. And they were all up. They were all moving, cheering away. And we said, whoa. So we went in the dressing room, and they came in and said, I know we don't see people until the end, but they just want to come and say hello. So he said, oh, well, okay. And so all of these people came in, and they're all saying, man, that was great. You guys were great. It's just like being at home. And of course, they were all Americans. because it was right by one of the American Air Force bases.
Yeah.
So it was like going home. So we did another version of Nicky Hokey and the James Brown. That moment when they were cheering and all sort of came in to say hi. That doesn't happen very often.
Oh, that's incredible. Because you mentioned about a roadie coming and telling you about that.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that Elvis Costello, or I guess at the time what it could be called Declan McManus still, was your roadie in inverted commas or helped out. Is that true?
He wasn't a roadie, no. That story is probably mixed with Martin Belmont, who was the second guitar player in the Rumour. So he came and lived with us. It was just, people used to hear of this band, the Brinsleys. They'll put you up for a few days if you're in a bad way, And we did. And Martin was one of those people. He'd left home or left what he was doing. I think he wanted to be like a cameraman for film. Realised that playing in a band was much more fun, and possibly you get much better off from it. So he came and said, can I hang out? And so we said, yeah. Showed him my amplifier and said, you're going to have to move this in and out and help with the gear. So that was our thing. You can come and stay, but if you do come and stay, then there's work to be done. So Martin was my roadie for a few weeks.
Right, got it.
How did you go then to the Rumour? Obviously, we've looked at a few things, and there's obviously such an overlap between band members, between Kippington Lodge and Brinsley Schwarz and the Rumour. It's the evolution of that. I just wondered how that all came about.
So the Brinsleys lasted 5 years, 1970 to 75. So it was around the end of the fifth year, which would have been in spring of 75. The Brinsleys broke up, so we all went our separate ways. I know Bob got into producing and produced quite a few people. Nick went into recording Rockpile. Ian left London and went to Wales, and I and my family moved in with my mum and dad, and I spent the summer with my dad learning to trout fish, trying to learn to play sax, which I played not very well, but well enough to later play sax with Graham Parker the Rumour. Billy, I don't know what happened to Billy at that point. I think he went off and played drums in a band. So I wrote a few songs. Dave Robinson, who had been our manager in the Brinsleys, he had a little studio at the top of the Open Anchor in the attic, where he had a valve recording desk that he bought from Decca Records. So his idea was to get the studio equipment up. He would offer free use if the person who was recording would agree to like a blanket signing if there was anybody that Dave wanted to record or use. And one day he phoned me up. So at this point there's a disagreement about who did what. So if you've heard this story another way, I think what I think happened is right. So yeah, Dave phoned me up and said, told me what he'd been doing, and I kind of half knew that because Martin was living upstairs at the Open Anchor, and he and I occasionally went and played tennis. So Dave just said, I've got this singer-songwriter. I think you'd be great playing with him. He needs a band. I've got these two younger guys, Steve and Andrew, who are a rhythm section, and Bob and Martin. You'd be great. So why don't you come down? There's no money. You're just going to have a good time, and we're going to try and record this guy. That guy turned out to be Graham Parker. When we'd finished the recording, we were packing up the gear and everything, and I said, and this is where it depends on who you talk to. I think I said, well, that was good fun, wasn't it? Why don't we do more? So we loosely agreed to play as a band, and I think we rehearsed every day. But so by the time that Graham had signed record deals and everything and was about to record his first album, I think the record company said, yeah, that'd be... I think we can do a deal, but we want the Rumour to be the backing band in this which he had. Not only did he have to get that past the record company, but he also had to get it past us.
Yeah.
And one of the things, having just, only a couple of months broken up with bands that we'd been with for a long time, some of us were a bit worried about that, and some of us were very worried about it. And we agreed to do one album and one tour of England. We didn't really stop working for 3 years.
I was going to ask actually about whether or not there was a tension between you coming from a band which was probably quite democratic, Brinsley Schwarz, and then going to being the backing band, The Rumour, where perhaps maybe it wasn't quite as democratic. What was there a tension between the two, going from one to the other, or were you just happy to play?
I have no idea. I just know that I was just happy to play, and I think I probably stuck my nose into requirements or conversations where I tried to maybe remind everybody that we were supposed to be doing this for fun and not for being a band that was going to go out and play. And it changed in about a few weeks, really, to being a backing band, which was also fun. So I don't really remember enough about it, except for there are some little things that happened that I do remember, but I don't remember there being a problem of any kind. I think we were all, if I could go forward a long time, 3 Chords Good.
Yep, great album.
Yeah,
Coat Hangers, a particularly good song.
Enjoyed playing the solo on that.
Let's go back to a time in prehistory, when the women walked out to the bush with a stick from a tree, when the men sat around in the mud and the sand and the sod, when they stared at the wild stars and the bits of God. Same dark forces operate here now today. The reptilian brain keeps forward and comes out to play. Always on the prowl, ready to strip your rights away, to send you back to the back alley, back to a darker day. Yeah, here come the wrecking crew swinging their hammers. Come on, girls, get your coat hangers.
Yes, go forward. That was a week. We spent pretty much a week near Woodstock, and just laughed all the time. Everything was funny. Everything was cool, and we just laughed as though we'd been together for the last 25 years instead of spending 5 years doing the Brinsleys and then all sorts of different stuff, and then suddenly meeting up. So instead of what you were saying is that there might have been tension in it, it was kind of the other way around. It was like when you start in a band, there's always tension as people kind of try to get their position in the hierarchy. So that happened when we were young, but not at all when we were much older. So being older, we just couldn't be bothered with that stuff and just laughed all the time. Bob, in particular, I remember was very funny at times.
It must have worked well because you then recorded Mystery Glue. So
yeah,
you obviously it wasn't just a one-off album. You made a couple.
Yeah. So Mystery Glue, that's my favourite Graham Parker record, and also my favourite record in terms of the band playing. I think that's a really good record.
So you've joined the Rumour. Was there once again was there a moment where you perhaps realised that band, Graham Parker and the Rumour, had something maybe different that perhaps lifted you out of the I'm hesitant to call it pub rock roots, but was there a moment where you sort of the band lifted themselves out of that and clearly were significantly bigger than that?
All I remember is at some point, so it must have been the Melody Maker. We'd get the Melody Maker every week, the Melody Maker, and there it was, pub rock emblazoned on the front cover, and somebody in the press had called it pub rock. At which point we decided really didn't have much to do with it anymore. Our railing against fame and fortune, there were some occasions where we took a turn away from the possibility of going forward money-wise, and did what we think was right. We didn't want those things. Even then, by then, I think we were still not wanting fame and fortune. We wanted to play rock and roll. I guess at some point that changed. The more you do, and without being affected by your past, it gets harder and harder to not be affected, to carry on. So there's a Brinsley song, "Happy Doing What We're Doing," that kind of summed it up in a way, because we were
Happy doing what we're doing, happy doing it right, and we'll keep on doing what we're doing, so long as the feeling is right. Well, I was scumbag bound for a couple of days, talking to a friend of mine. He said I got to do the thing I do best before I lose my mind. I said, man, I ain't no guru. Who am I to say what's right or wrong? But it might help to shed a little light on the matter if we sing this song. We're happy doing what we're doing, happy doing it right, and we'll keep on doing what we're doing, so long as
the Melody Maker picture that is Graham and is live, me and Graham singing into one microphone, and I know that we were playing Don't Ask Me Questions. So by then we'd experienced playing in bigger places, going down really well in bigger places. I don't think we changed abruptly. Things got different.
You've obviously got a good relationship with Graham because you seem to have you've done duo tours with him. You've appeared on many of his other non Graham Parker and the Rumour albums. That's obviously endured that relationship.
Yes, I think well for a long so after Graham Parker and the Rumour split up, which was gradually from 79 late to 81, that all happened quite gradually and without any problems. The way that I rejoined him, if you like, was when the Rumour finally broke up, which was after we'd been Graham Parker's backing band. We broke away from Graham and then broke up. I made a decision that there wasn't anybody else that would possibly ask me to be in their band or that I could think of, and except for Graham, I didn't want to play with anyone but Graham in that kind of way and for a long time. So at some point I decided that I would have to be in America. I wasn't going to find anybody to play how and on what, except for people from America. We had an agent, a really nice chap in New York. I was talking to him and he said, well, if you want to come and stay over here, you come live with me, and I bought a loft in Manhattan and it needs doing up, changing into an office with different rooms and everything. It was just a dirty, great space. I said, yeah, I can do that. I just finished doing up our third house, I think it was, with my dad. I went to America, hung out with Alan, our agent, and started to rebuild his loft. And 9 weeks it took me to do. And we had to be okayed by New York Fire Brigade. We got a grade A pass. So that evening, he went out with Graham because Graham had finished making that album, Another Great Area, and was putting a band together of the American players. They couldn't find a lead guitarist. Extraordinary that you're an English rock star and you can't find an American guitar player. At some point in the conversation, Alan's realised that Graham was still undecided and everything. And he said, "You know, Brinsley's here, don't you?" Graham said, "Is it what? What's he doing here?" And Alan said, "He's just done up my loft. He's looking for a band to play with." And Graham said, "What? And you think he might be interested?" And Alan said, "He's basically jumping at the bit to get going again." And that's how I got back with Graham and produced 2 albums and toured and everything. 7 or 8 years. And the same thing happened after we split up. That time was I just went back to. So I'd been fixing guitars for a while, and so I just went back. I went back to fixing guitars.
So being a luthier then, did that change the way that you think about yourself as a musician or about others? Or was it a functional thing, just fixing guitars? Did it change anything about you?
No, I became a guitar player because I fell totally in love with Hank Marvin, the Shadows, and I don't think I've met so many guitar players into the Shadows as I did as a luthier. I just loved it so much that being in a band was the nearest thing, or being a luthier was the nearest thing to being in a band that you could get. And by that time I was quite good as a luthier because I'd learnt the physics involved in repairing or setting up guitars. And in fact, I think I changed some of the things that were important. So it's not a functional thing. There are parts of it which are functional, but when it comes down to the final thing, the final few little adjustments, they're personal. And you have to, in my opinion, you have to go the whole way in the simple action of setting a guitar up.
So Brinsley, there's just one last question, which is, your career has been so varied and so long. Is there anything that you look back now and think that's my favourite memory? That's the thing that I'll is as a legacy moment for you. Is there anything there that springs to your mind?
There are hundreds of things. So I had a lot of fun with all the other stuff. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad. But so obviously playing while we were recording, the song is Second Best. I can't remember if it was me or James Hallowell who said this could really do with a guitar solo, and we manufactured another verse. That was one of the things I loved about recording nowadays. If you decided that a song could be longer than that, really, if you felt like it, you could just get the machine would do it straight away. Although you can do those things by slicing up tape, which Dave Edmunds was really good at doing. You could just take a piece of tape out and move it around, I think. But you could do that so easily because I did that. We did that to this song without any thinking about what it might be like. I think I ran through it once and then recorded it. It's not like it was in the 70s. I wasn't trying to be like anybody. I was just grooving. When we finished it, I think I thought that was pretty damn good.
Never trust is my place in line. I can bring every ounce of love. It can never be enough.
I also saw on your latest album that you covered the Graham Parker track, "Watch the Moon Come Down." Why did you do that? What's attracted you to that song?
In the early times, I think we used to do things because they felt like fun. You could raise people's astonishment or whatever you call it by doing something like that. Shouting at the Moon, that's got that on, and Tangled has got Love Gets You Twisted. That's another Graham Parker song. So that was the first one that I put on of his, and I did that because one of it's Twisted and Watch the Moon Come Down. They're my favorite Graham Parker songs. Can I choose a track that you can play?
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so Hard to Change.
Rich man living in his penthouse suite sees the poor man down on the street. Says, "Come on up, brother, have some of mine. I've got plenty, you're welcome anytime." Politician, his place of power, says, "I am the man and this is the hour. Gonna turn it all upside down and just do what's right. You can believe me, 'cause I have seen the light. You can be good for goodness sake. You can give, you don't always have to take. Don't need nobody to show you the way. You can be good. You can be good. You can be good for goodness sake."
Why would you choose that?
Because it's one of my favorite songwriters, Randy Newman, who's a great sarcastic songwriter. Hard to Change is sort of Newman-esque, if you like, and it's more or less saying, war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. So my version of that is two generals standing on the battlefield. Going to be a big fight and thousands will be killed. One calls to the other, "Can we not give this a rest? We could all be friends. Don't you think that might be best?" Followed by stinging guitar solo and great organ with James Halliwell.
Yes, I saw that Hammond organ. All right, brilliant.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's been really, really interesting. Great to talk to you.
Okay, thank you for your time, Brinsley.
You too. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it too.
Excellent. Brilliant. Good to speak to you. Cheers.
Cheers.
See
you again.
Breaking those habits was hard to do.
Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast.
If you're liking what you're hearing, then please do subscribe to all of our channels, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. We also have a website, uncharted-sounds.co.uk. So check out that for all the old episodes and lots more besides.
Now, as you know, we do our research from a variety of sources, but if you want to add any more detail for us, or even correct us on anything, then please do get in touch with us. Where can they get in touch with us, Noel?
They can contact us on our email address, which is unchartedsoundspodcast@gmail.com.
And of course, you can also get in touch with us on our Facebook group, the Uncharted Sounds group, as well as our Facebook page, the Uncharted Sounds page.
And once again, thanks to Crashland for writing the theme tune specifically for our podcast.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.